So you ready?
Yeah, you can start anytime.
All right. Well, thank you, Vistas, for tuning into this webinar. And I never miss an opportunity to say thanks to a national service member. Anytime I have a chance to cross paths, you are really serving our nation for a year, and of course, Iowa Campus Compact and your individual site. So I just want to first, the very first thing, say thanks for a year of service. Okay, so we're going to talk today about grant writing, and the reason this should matter is that, you know, if you can get additional funds, it will expand or enrich the work of your site. And of course, that's the main thing people think. It's actually money to help us do our work. In addition to that, the experience in writing a grant is very valuable to you. I will say that if you can put on a resume, I've written a successful grant proposal, it makes you, I promise, more hireable, more employable in the nonprofit world. It's also fun to work with others. You know, many times a grant opportunity involves working with partners, and, you know, so it gives you a chance, you know, the writing of the grant and then the doing the work that results from the grant. It gives you new collegial relationships and experiences. And then if you get the grant, like in the case of a Martin Luther King Jr. Service Day grant, having a new project funded by the grant gives you a chance to promote additional service opportunities. So here's what we're going to talk about very briefly. And because we have about 1 hour, right, Katie?
Yeah.
Okay. Because we have an hour, we won't be able to talk about any of these things in great detail. So I'm very happy to send you more information on any of them. But these will kind of be our topics. First about, you know, how do you find a funding source, and then getting permission to write a grant. Thinking about, you know, what do you want to achieve, and so developing objectives and targets, and then writing a budget and a budget narrative, and securing letters of support. And then we can't forget that eventually you need to actually report on the project. And then we're going to say a few words about a proposal that you have the opportunity to either write or collaborate for writing. So we'll talk a little bit about that specific grant opportunity. I know that all of the Vistas for Iowa Campus Compact, and for that matter, Vistas period, are in organizations because of the nature of VISTA. It's about eradicating poverty after all. So of course there's always going to be a need, you know, to get additional funds. No matter how solid your budget is, it's always great to get a grant for some kind of a special project. Sometimes organizations rely on grants just for their general budget to do their work. And actually, sometimes a grant can augment both, provide money for a special project and the general operating expenses. Now, it's hard to even express this notion of how many grant opportunities there are out there. If you Google grant service learning, when I did, I got over 3,800,000 hits. I Googled grants children at risk, again, over 3.3 million. Now, I will tell you that many of them are impractical, or they don't make sense for you. We'll talk a little bit more about how that, you know, how you determine that. But, you know, to just suffice it to say that there are grants galore out there. And ones that you do want to seek are the ones that are looking for an organization to do work that aligns with the person with the money's goals. Maybe it's a philanthropy organization, maybe it's a corporate foundation, but you know, they're looking for particular kinds of work. So that means if it's the kind of work you do, you are looking for them. Now, When you identify an appropriate source, here are, I mentioned Google a moment ago, but you saw that I got 3.8 million hits. And so, you can't go through 3.8 million RFPs. So it's better to kind of narrow it. You can actually do that by Google. I once Googled for a student who was in a writing class here at Central College. He was working with one of our community partners who serves individuals who are HIV positive. And I Googled grants to create HIV awareness among adolescents in Iowa or something. And sure enough, I found one. So, you can narrow it down using Google. What is probably more productive is to ask within your organization, because there may be foundations or grant-making entities of some kind who have provided funding for your organization before. United Way, for example, or a community foundation. So the people at your site, your colleagues, will have some ideas. Not only within your organization, but that organization's external networks. If you are working with an organization who serves children at risk, children who represent families in poverty, there are coalitions that that bring agencies like that together. Okay, so you could ask within those coalitions. It's true. Is that traffic noise bothering you? I can close a window. Oops, you're muted, Katie.
I'm fine. I don't know.
Okay. If anybody somehow communicate with Katie that it's a problem if that I've got a window open and I can hear some non-muffled cars. So your organization undoubtedly has some networks. And while it's true that to some degree you are competing with organizations for grant dollars, right? If Simpson College and Central College are both asking for a mini grant from, Junior League of Des Moines, then technically we're competitors. But for the most part, people who are in the field of working for the common good are very willing to share information that could benefit everyone. You don't really go into a nonprofit work, either service learning or at a nonprofit organization. You don't get into that if you're worried about proprietary and being selfish with resources. So ask individuals with whom your organization has relationships with. You can ask outside of your own region, but colleagues maybe in the same field. Or let's say you work, well, in the case of service learning, we have the National Campus Compact, for example. So in addition to Iowa Campus Compact, we could ask the National Campus Compact institutions for recommendations. Ask other vistas who are serving agencies within your own city or state. And then there are always consortia. Iowa Campus Compact, I cannot begin to tell you, there's no way for me to describe the ways Iowa Campus Compact has supported our work here at Central College. And our IACC state office, Emily and Katie, Justin, they are connected with funding sources that we would never hear about at the more micro level in Iowa Campus Compact members. So they can help us connect. I'm going to apply for a Martin Luther King Jr. Service Day grant. I just applied for another grant that Iowa Campus Compact made known to me. So that is a source that you should be grateful for. And then just professional organizations. Let's say you're going to Rotary to make a presentation about some of the work you're doing. Rotary itself sometimes gives grants, or the people there know about it. So just at organizations that you may cross paths with in your daily work. Oh, now there is I have a grant writing glossary of terms that I neglected to send to Katie, but I will send that to her. It's not something that you need for this webinar, and unless you're working on a grant and you come to a term that you don't understand, you might not ever need it. But a lot of times there are words in a grant proposal that a foundation is telling you this is how you apply, and there are words that are very unique to grant writing. If you haven't done it before, you might wonder, what does this even mean? So I have a little glossary that you can take a look at. For any grant, you want to make absolutely sure that you read every word of instruction carefully for so many reasons. You might be working on a grant that's going to take you 30 or 40 hours to write over time if it's a big one. Lots of, colleges write grants for TRIO programs that probably take 30 or 40 hours to write at least. Whatever the amount of time is, you don't want to wrap that much time into something if for some reason it's not going to work for you anyway. For example, sometimes a grant will start right out in the information. They right off the bat, they will say, here's who is eligible. Sometimes colleges or 501c3s aren't eligible. Sometimes it's just for a national service organization or something. So you read the instructions for that reason. And by the way, speaking of the glossary, the one term that you may not be familiar with that you will need to know for this webinar is the term RFP. And that stands for Request for Proposals. And it's usually just some kind of an informational communique that lets you know, hey, we're going to be giving some grants and here's how you'd apply it. So an RFP is something that gives information about a grant. And you would refer to that, and that's what you would want to read thoroughly to get all of the instructions. When you get ready to actually write the proposal, that term grant, if you say, I wrote a grant, the grant actually is talking about the money, right? So what you're talking about is writing a grant proposal. And there are some components. We're going to talk about those in a moment. But the main one, when you talk about writing a grant, is the section called the narrative. It's where you tell the story of what you're going to do with the money or whatever else they're asking you to tell the story about. Now, you notice on the PowerPoint slide, I have the phrase, less is more. And that has to do with the fact that people reading grant proposals are often overwhelmed by the task. They might be reading 30 of them. And so if you can tell your story in fewer words rather than more words, you should use fewer. When a grant RFP says the proposal can be no longer than 5 pages, they mean exactly that. It can't be longer than 5 pages. It means you have up to and including 5. That doesn't mean you have to write 5. It's possible for a proposal, you can tell the story in 1 page. I'm going to share a grant narrative with you today that's like a page and a half. And I have written some grants that were 10 or 15 pages. I've written some that were 1 page. I'm telling you this to remind you, don't think you have to fill 5 pages if that's what the RFP says. Some people applying for this grant may have a complex enough project that it's going to take them, 5 or 10 pages. Less is more. And it's very important. The RFP will say, write a narrative, and this is what you need to include. And then they'll have probably like a bulleted list. And my recommendation is to bullet either bold or bullet or in some way call attention to the fact that you are providing exactly what they've asked for. If the proposal, for example, says, write a proposal, tell us why you need it, tell us a little bit about your organization, and tell us what you hope to accomplish, I would have headings that said, here's a bit about our organization, here's the project we want to do, here's why we need it or who will benefit. Whatever it is they've asked for, it's easier for them to read if you call attention to the requested components in some way. Now, here is just a little tip that I have figured out on my own. Back in the day, before a lot of technology, you were either typing one or you were doing it on a Word document. So you could have all kinds of formatting options. You could have bullet points. You could do bolding. Now, sometimes proposals are just submitted online, and you just paste a block of text into an online deal. Now, under those circumstances, depending on what sort of format they're using, what technological platform they're using to take those proposals in, there may not be a way to bullet something. So, because I feel so strongly that formatting can help tell the story, I have figured out a few ways to do that. One is I go to various kinds of Word documents and see if it will let me paste in there with the bullets. If it won't, I use an asterisk. You know, you can type anything on this form that you're putting into little fields. I type an asterisk to call attention to a particular point. And, you know, sometimes you have a limit on characters. Sometimes it doesn't say you have 10 pages. Sometimes it says you have 10,000 words. Or sometimes it says you have 1,000 words, 10,000 characters or something. So you have to ask yourself, if you have a lot to tell, you have to ask yourself, am I willing to give up those characters to add an asterisk? For me, clarity is always important in telling the story. So that's just a little tip that you will probably not read anywhere else. If you want a bullet point and you think, drat, I can't use a bullet point on this format, type an asterisk, you know, and then line them up just like a bulleted list would be. The grant narrative, the proposal narrative, is your opportunity to share with a potential funder your organization's values. Earlier, I made a point to say it's important to find a funder where the values sort of line up. If you are a nonviolence organization and you're asking for money, this is an extreme example, you're a nonviolent organization and you're asking money to do a workshop about how to get your town to adopt a gun control standard, you don't want to ask the NRA for that, correct? So you want to align the values, and then you want to make sure that you use language and you say things about who you are and what you're doing. By you, I mean your organization, who your organization is and what you're going to do. You want to give them some clues that tell them, oh, wow, this organization, this people applying for this grant, they get who I am here at writing this grant at Children and Family Urban Ministries or Simpson College or Central College or Drake. Let them know. Find a way to express your values. I'll just give you a personal example so you will understand what I'm talking about. Here at Central College, we believe in the importance of allowing community partners to define their own needs. We don't want to say, okay, we're going to send you 10 students from child and adolescent development and they're going to babysit kids for you on Thursdays at 4:30. We would rather listen to the need and figure out how to plug college resources in. And many funders share that approach to service work. They want community to be empowered to define their own need. So I always make sure that I include a few words about community voice, how we're going to make sure a community partner is important in the way we are working on this work that we're going to get the money for from the organization. That's just an example. I want to let them know we value community input. So I'm going to, even though the RFP didn't say, tell how you will capture community voice, I find a way to work that in anyway. Not lengthy, not to make it long or tedious for them to read, but to let them know who it is that's asking them for money. Now, anytime that you write a grant, regardless of where your VISTA site is or an organization where you're employed as a professional after your VISTA term, anytime you work on a grant, it's really important that you understand like sort of the culture of your organization or the protocols that are required. You can see why organizations can't just let employees go out and start writing grants like crazy to anybody they want and asking for money without anybody even knowing. So as an employee, you need to get permission to write the grant, and you need to talk with others in your organization whose lives might be affected by this grant. If you're going to write a grant proposal where you're going to employ a bunch of student workers, you better talk to the student worker, the student employment office. If you are an arts program and you are going to donate some gallery space for some artists to come in and do something, you better talk to the person who's managing the facility itself. So it might be the business office, it might be human resources, and then there's this whole, well, you know, lack of a better term, this dinosaur that we call risk management. You've got to make sure that what you're proposing isn't going to put your organization at risk for liability. You need to think through that, and you probably have professionals in your office for whom that's the specialty. So it might be that your boss will ask you to go, you know, if you're a small organization, you probably don't have a lawyer on staff, but you probably have somebody who's kind of the business manager of the agency. Go to that person and say, is this going to be okay? What kind of a consent form do I need to have signed? You definitely need to think through risk management, and you need to make sure that what you're proposing is okay. And then, so there might be other internal or external stakeholders. In a moment, we'll talk about other partners and asking for them to demonstrate their support. But let's say you are a nonprofit organization who has an after-school program. And one of the ways you're going to implement the new curriculum for which you're getting money in this grant, you're going to call up Iowa Wesleyan and ask them if some service learners, you want service learners to be able to play with the kids and help implement the curriculum. You don't want to write that into the proposal till you've talked to them, if that makes sense. So you need to make sure that you talk through this project and get the input and make sure everything is okay for any person who might be involved at any level. Okay, so the components are, we've just been talking about the narrative, and there's usually some place, well, there should be some place where you can talk about what you want to do, the objectives. There will also be an appendix, just like in college when you write a term paper, sometimes you have to have some things in the appendix. And then there's the budget and a budget narrative. So those are sort of the main components. Going back to that bullet point objectives, this is the heart of what you're doing, right? The narrative is telling the story of the objectives. So many times a grant proposal will say, tell us what your objectives are, and in fact, tell us, and then they use a variety of different words and lexicon to explain something measurable. if it uses the word targets or performance measures. There are so many different words that might mean, how are you really going to measure whether it worked, or how many, quantify what it is you want to do. Now, there are so many things that we do that are really difficult to quantify. If you work for a bank and your job is to make 100 auto loans in the next month, that is very easy to quantify. I want to make 100 automobile loans in the next month here in Keokuk, Iowa. However, it's not that easy. Some of the work that we do in education, and I think all of the VISTAs in IACC are educators, either formally in a college or in a nonprofit organization where the work really is about education. So it's a little bit harder to quantify those. And I sometimes sort of wring my hands over, brother, how are we going to communicate this? And that could really be a workshop all on its own. And in fact, I have examples of objectives worksheets that I can send you if you want examples of educational objectives and measurable targets. But in the end, it comes down to you asking yourself, what's going to be different? If I get this money and I do this program, what will be different? So it might be that you want to say 10 children's homework completion rate will increase. Or it might be that it is, we're going to do this program for 40 kids, and we hope that 90% of them come away with a feeling of improved self-esteem. And of course, you'd have some questions in a survey pre and post the curriculum. In the end, objectives are, what do you want to do? Kind of goals, but a specific objective. What do you want to accomplish? And it usually does want you to somehow quantify it. If you see the word measurable or the word target or the word measure, that means they want to know some specific data that can be produced from this. It isn't always easy, but on the other hand, we need to understand that there are good reasons for them to ask that. It's really easy for me to grumble about, oh brother, how are we going to quantify this program we're doing to empower girls? It's really hard to do that on our end. But think about why the funder wants us to do that. For one thing, they have a responsibility to give the money to organizations who are going to do good work that's going to matter, right? And sometimes they are a foundation that's trying to raise money, like a community foundation. They're asking donors to give money, so they have to say to their donors, we've given money and look at these 10 things that happened at this grant that we made to Simpson College. So give them a break. Even though it's hard, they have good reasons for asking that. Okay, now when you're talking about this project in the narrative, and by the way, that objectives might be a separate document. It could also be woven into the narrative. That would be a wonderful place to use the asterisks rather than run on text if you wanted to say, here's what we hope to accomplish. I believe in the clarity of bullets. So sometimes those are two documents, sometimes it's all in one called a narrative. And then the appendix is a bunch of miscellaneous stuff that might help them understand the project better. For example, let's say sometimes they ask you, how are you going to evaluate it? And you say, well, we're going to have people who've come to this exhibit that we're putting on, we're going to have them fill out a little quick survey afterwards to know if they enjoyed it and if they learned something. So then the grantor would benefit from knowing, what are you going to put in that survey? Here's the thing about this. This is your opportunity to show them how thorough you are. This is an opportunity for you to show them, I've thought through this. I'm not just saying I'm going to evaluate. Look, I'm going to evaluate. Here's the survey. Sometimes they want to know how you're going to promote it. And you can design a poster. Again, it's your opportunity to show them how thorough you are and what a great planner you are. There may be other things. Sometimes an organization would benefit from an example of a newsletter from your organization or something like that. So this appendix, singular appendix, plural appendices, just means anything that will clarify it. The organization will, I don't know if you can hear that, but loud muffler, less motorcycle out there. The appendix just is that opportunity for you to collect anything. You may not need to include them. It may be that they say these are all you're allowed to include. Just these things you're allowed to include. And then you don't have to put them in. But if they let you put an appendix, you have everything to gain by including something. I don't have it on this slide. I think I've got it coming up. Another thing that is often asked, yeah, you know what, that is on another slide. I'll get to that later. Okay, another very important part of the budget, of the grant proposal, is the budget. And I'm going to show you in a moment an example of a budget so you will understand the basic principles of a budget. And I guess that's all I'm going to say about that for right this minute. Okay, yes, here's my slide about the other thing that's kind of like an appendix. Almost always, grants want to know if you claim you're working with partners. Of course, an organization wants you to work with partners. It's going to make a project better to bring additional organizations in to work together. And so they might ask you, who else in the narrative you might have written, we're going to use the space, we're going to put on classes for children, and we're going to hold those in the gym of a community center next door. The person reading this proposal wants to know that you really have permission for that. They want to know that you've actually talked to these people that you claim you're going to partner with. And so it's a good idea to have anybody who has any remote connection to write a letter of support. And you're just going to ask people ahead of time, could you write a letter of support for this grant that we're writing? Now, I'm guilty of working like crazy on a proposal. It's almost time to the deadline, and then I remember, oh my goodness, I need a couple of letters of support. And I have to call a community partner and say, I am so sorry, but this is due tomorrow. Would you be willing to write a letter of support? And actually, we've all been there. I get calls all the time, and I can tell people are working up to saying, could you please write a letter of support? Because they tell me they're writing a grant for some new computers, and they know that we're going to send college students to help little kids learn the computer. And I can tell where this conversation is going. They need a letter of support maybe later today. And the good news is that almost anybody in this kind of work understands the pressure on grants, and they'll write a letter. Now, you can offer to provide assistance to them, so you can actually write the letter. I usually write a draft, and then I say, of course, you may want to write this yourself, but here's some examples of things you could say, if you wanted to. Of course, it's up to you what you want to say. And you could actually write it for them. I, a lot of times, have community partners write a letter and ask me, do you want to just sign this? Now, I always want to put my own touch on it. So I usually start with theirs and add some stuff. But one way or another, the more you can help the partner write the letter of support for you, the better. And of course, you're going to explain to them why you need this letter. Chances are you've already talked to them about the work that will be accomplished. Our community partners know that they have consistent service learning support from us. So they don't have to call me if somebody's going to write a grant and say, we're going to do this at our after-school program, and we have an ongoing understanding that we're going to send them at least 10 volunteers each semester. They may not have told me that they're asking money for some new books. When they get ready to submit the grant, they're going to say in this proposal, Central College is going to send service learners, and they're going to work with our children, and in fact, they're going to pay their students gas money to get here. So I'll write a letter and say, we love working with this organization. They're ethical and responsible. They give our experiences learning that we can't produce in the classroom. And we believe so much in that we're going to contribute gas money so our students can come do that. Okay, so then I guess those sub-bullet points there are just give them what you can give them that will help them. Now, we're going to actually show you some examples in a minute, but while we're still doing this PowerPoint, I want to touch briefly on reporting. This is more important than you think. First of all, it's so easy to forget about the reporting. After all, it's an accomplishment to get the money and then to do the work, right? Reporting on it is easy to let slide. But I've never gotten a grant. I don't think I've ever gotten a grant where I didn't have to do some kind of report. Sometimes they don't even have any particular form, and they say just write and tell us how it was. Most of the time, there are some very specific guidelines for the report. I could send examples. If I don't want to clog your inbox up, but we'll put my contact information, or you can get a hold of me through Katie or through Emily or Justin, or find me on the Central College website, and I can send you examples of reports that tell about grants so you can just kind of get the gist of it. But if they say the grant period is going to involve work done and it needs to end by May 31st and a report is due by July 1, you better have that report done. And I was involved in a grant project one time. I was not responsible for writing the report. The person who was neglected to write that report and got a letter from the Iowa Department of Cultural Affairs saying, if we don't have this report within 2 weeks, you will never get a grant from the state of Iowa again. So deadlines are important. Sometimes it's written, sometimes it's a matter of an electronic thing, that they do it in the form of a survey monkey. Could be anything. My advice is just give them what they asked for. If they say, tell us how many people you served, what blah, 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 just answer the questions. And I don't want to get out of order, but as you're answering those questions, sometimes things don't go exactly as you've imagined when you're writing this proposal in the first place. After all, it is what you're proposing to do. It is not the end of the world for most grants. There are some exceptions that it would not be good consequences if you didn't meet your targets. But for the most part, you can be honest. Well, I would say be honest no matter what. Most of the time, that honesty isn't going to hurt one thing. It's a lesson learned for everybody. And I can tell you, sometimes they will even come right out and say, were there any particular challenges that you faced? And it's okay to be honest about, what, we really thought this one thing was going to be smooth, but it wasn't. It's okay to do that. And then if you have a way to communicate the met objectives, maybe that is, well, we did our survey, we sent it out to 100 people, 65 people took it and returned to us, and 60% of those respondents said that this was something they learned, or they could tell us one thing they learned. Or it might be more qualitative information. It may be that you send them some quotations from people who've benefited from the grant. I remember getting a grant through Iowa Campus Compact that we were expanding our service learning in Spanish. And one of the things our students did as part of this project was helped at some tax clinics, you know, the VITA, the low-income taxpayer clinics, where our accounting students would help. And our Spanish students were actually going to help welcome families and play with kids while the parents were getting their income tax appointment underway. And so I told the grantor when I did the report, here's something from Des Moines United Way. We could not have held that tax clinic at the Visitation Catholic Church for Latinos. We could not have offered that clinic if it wouldn't have been for Central College volunteers. So that's a sample of a met objective and a success story both. And be honest about what doesn't work. I got a grant once, actually same grant, Spanish department, and one of our ELL sites stopped operation. They just ceased. It was in a church. The church decided we're not going to do this anymore. We had said we're going to be sending X number of students for X semesters. Well, I didn't panic. I called the people who'd given us the money. In this case, it was a consortium of Campus Compact, and said, is it okay if we spend that travel money on other sites? And they said yes. So in the report, we said this ELL site ceased operations. We checked with this, you know, I knew the name of the person that I checked with, and we directed those funds to transportation to this other ELL site. It's okay to be honest. 99% of the time, they will really appreciate it, because it's a lesson learned. You know, you can't help that an ELL site shut down, but there are all kinds of things that you learn when you're doing this kind of work that mean, uh-oh, that just wasn't quite what I expected, but you know it for next time. So they're going to appreciate the honesty. Okay, now, these slides that I've shown you up till now, I have done a few other webinars for Iowa Campus Compact, and Katie knows that I've worked I've sometimes presented about grant writing in a class that we have that's about nonprofit writing. This time, this is timed because there are opportunities for you to either write a grant proposal or assist with writing a grant proposal for a Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service. You all know about National Days of Service. The federal government appreciates any National Day of Service observations that we have. And our Iowa Campus Compact has secured the national grant. This is a feather. Emily, I don't know if you're still on here, but Iowa Campus Compact did a great job. They probably had to write a proposal to whoever this money, I'm assuming it came from CNCS. Okay, so they snagged this money for which we can write subgrants, right? So this is a real life opportunity. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this, but I want to add the word of caution here that I'm going to give you a couple of sample things here. I did not have time to write our MLK proposal between when I knew I was going to do this webinar and now. I didn't have time to actually share an actual proposal and budget and everything with you. But I do have some documents that will help you understand a little bit more about this process. I highly recommend that you read everything, and you will have access to a grant from Iowa Campus Compact. I want you to read all of the material that's there. Look at the application. I've taken a glance at it. And also, they even have given us the courtesy of providing a rubric that they're going to use to evaluate. So you're going to be able to know exactly what they're looking for, right? That's such a great thing to provide. So my advice is read everything you can before you start. There's technical assistance on a website that Justin was telling me about, and it has all kinds of FAQs, and so you can spend some time there. If there's a question, it's on there. And I'm going to be giving you a sample narrative that is completely fictitious. here's what I did. I found one of our old MLK grant successful proposals, and I tweaked it just a little bit. It's fictitious, and it's not a perfect example because the topic, one of the goals this time is to line up with this thing called Healthy Futures, and this is more of a stretch for that. It was a different kind of objective that year. So while this would be a great project to do sometime, and I could put you in touch with a community partner to do it, Katie has experience working with them, it's not a perfect project for this MLK grant. I just want to make sure that this narrative is contrived for this purpose. And then the other thing I'm going to show you is a budget worksheet. It is not in any way, shape, or form appropriate for MLK. It's something that I'm using as an example to illustrate a few things about grant budgets, okay? So now I hope I don't have trouble with this. I think I can. Okay. Now, can you see that document, Katie? Okay. Okay. So this is a sample. I think it said we could have 5,000 characters this time. So let me show you how long this is. Really, a page and a half is what you can use up to. This is about 4,100 characters. And you notice that I've bolded a few sections here. Here's the need, and here's the overview of what we're going to do. Here's who we're going to be working with. Here's how we're going to be. This is all things that either they specifically outright asked for in the RFP, or I know they'll be wondering. Okay, so how are we going to recruit volunteers? It's a fair, safe bet. Anything you're applying for, reflection is going to be a good thing. We're a college, so we want to have reflection. So we're going to say this is how we're going to do it. And then, recognizing volunteers is something that most agencies care about. And then encourage additional service. I could see that from this RFP that's on the Campus Compact website, they want us to know how this project is going to lead to other service. And so I included a paragraph. I'll send this to you. And you can read this. I don't need to read it now, but this is a narrative that has been tweaked from a previous MLK Day project. I want to make sure that this project wouldn't be the best fit for this year's MLK. Okay. Now, I also want to talk to you about budget. And I am so sorry. It's a wild week in my office this week. Our precious Liz has been out because of a family matter regarding her mother's health and subsequent passing. And as a result of that, I did not have time to come up with a budget that is like the one that you would do for MLK.
I think we could forgive you, Cheri.
Oh, good. Thank you, Katie. But here's why I still want to show you a budget worksheet. There are a couple of things that would be helpful for you to know about doing a budget for a grant. And so this is just a very simple budget worksheet. This is actually adapted from that, definitely adapted for the purpose of simplicity for, sending college students to service learning sites. And we pay our students transportation, and it is a line item budget within academic affairs of Central College, but I'm always looking for ways for more money so we can do more of it, right? So in this case, the main thing we could see that it would be wonderful for us to get is some gas money. And at the time, by the way, sometimes an RFP will say, expenses cannot include transportation costs. This is why I say read it. Sometimes there are things that are excluded. This particular proposal was thrilled to provide gas money. So now on my screen, I've got pictures to my right kind of covering some of this up. Can you see the whole screen? Can you see the whole
we can only see the document you're showing.
You can see all the columns to the document?
No.
Okay, let me try this. Can you see that?
Well, I don't know what you're trying to show.
Okay, do you see this total cost column?
No, you don't have the budget document up.
Oh,
You still have the grant proposal.
it says my screen sharing is paused. The only other button I have says stop share. I want to keep sharing. What button do you think I need to push?
Well, you could always
Resume share. Let me try that.
and
Oh,
restart again.
that's odd. Okay. So did you see that narrative that I had up there?
Yeah, we saw the narrative.
All right, so let me try this now. Now, for some reason, when I put the document up on my screen, it says your screen sharing is paused. And when I try to unpause it, it goes off. Can you put it up on your...
Stop screen sharing.
What was that?
I would just stop the screen
Okay.
sharing and then share it again.
All right.
And now you're full camera because...
Yeah. Okay, let me try this. Do you see that?
No. You need to click on share screen again at the bottom. Otherwise, I can just share it. I have it too.
Okay, yeah. Would you share that budget thing then? Because this is not working for me for some reason. Am I still showing? You see me? That's odd.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
There you go.
Okay, now see. Oh. Do you still have it in front of you?
Well, I have it in front of me. Do you see it?
I see part of it. I can work from this as long as you can see it. Can you see all the columns of it?
Sam's shaking her head yes.
Okay, now see, it won't let me, I think I can remember I've got these pictures of all of you over here on my right. I wonder if I can just move.
You can move that.
Got it. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so this is an example of a budget worksheet. If you want me to, I'll send you a blank one of these, because this sometimes it's helpful to have a document just to think through things. And in the left-hand column is every single thing that a project would include, you'd need to pay for, or it would have some kind of value. Transportation, coordination. Whoa. Okay, now I lost it there. Okay.
I'll try again.
I've got it up if you do.
Can you share your screen?
I got a different looking thing there now. Let me see here. Show all windows. Now, I hate to admit how many windows I usually have open, but Kate, you already know that, I know, but. Well, no, I can't. Now I've got it there. Do you have it there?
I just pulled it up again, Cheri.
Okay. All right. So every single thing that would either cost something or conceivably have a value is in the left-hand column. So this whole project altogether would cost $3,850 if I actually had to pay for everything. And I really just want some gas and food from this foundation. So you'll notice that the foundation funds have their own column, requested foundation funds. I've got the gas in that column, and I've got the food, because I've read the RFP, and I know that those are two things they will allow. That middle column fits into something called either or both of these two terms, a match or an in-kind. And what that means, and this is a complex thing to try to get your mind wrapped around. And so if this is confusing for you, don't worry. It will eventually sink in, and I'd love to tell you more about it to help you have a better grasp of it. When I first heard this, it was really confusing to me. Really, it means, what are some other values to this that contribute to the project that we're not asking the foundation for? Some of it might be some of our own organization's money we're throwing in. Some of it might be something that it's not a tangible dollar. That's what we mean by in kind. So you'll notice that I have coordination. That is like, well, my time I'm going to spend a lot of time coordinating this service learning project. And so that I've figured out what my time is worth per hour, and it's going to amount to the value of $500. And we're going to, part of our grant was that we were going to celebrate the success with a community partner event or something like that. So if we were going to have to rent a room, it would be worth $50. We're going to let them use a room, or we've got the library talked into letting us use a room. But it's worth $50. If we were paying everything for this, we'd have to pay $50. So that's considered an in-kind. Background checks, you have to pay a lot of times for background checks for volunteers. And so I sometimes write that into the cost of a grant. Okay, so that's that. And this happened to be about expanding Spanish, so it was ESL materials. We're going to spend $500 on that. I've made these numbers up for this. I've tweaked them from the original proposal. So you notice we've asked this foundation for $2,300. And then actually the other stuff adds up to $1,550. So column A and column B equal column C. Every single thing relating to that project should go in one or the other, or sometimes divided. Maybe they would only say, well, we'll pay for half of your transportation. Then I would have had 1,000 in the column for the requested funds and 1,000 for our organizational match. And the important thing to remember is a budget form is going to look different. Anywhere you get a grant, they're not going to use this. This is something I made up. This is just something I made up. But this explains to you and lets you have a glimpse of what a budget sort of looks like. Now, a lot of grants.
MLK grant, Cheri. For the MLK grant,
yes,
on the website, they have the template that they would like used. And then Justin also said that he was going to upload a few examples of it filled out.
Wonderful. And I actually talked to Justin this morning and confessed to him, look, I'm going to do this webinar, and I'm really sorry. Is there a budget thing on there somewhere that I haven't seen yet? So I haven't looked at that, but you will have an opportunity to look at it, and not only that, look at samples. This is just to illustrate the concepts of something you're asking the money for and something that it's a value but you're not asking for. I hope that makes sense. Now, both the MLK grant and almost any other grant is also going to ask for something called a budget narrative. Don't panic. It doesn't mean another 5-page description. The budget narrative just means explain what you meant by that on your budget. So for this, the budget narrative would have said something like, we have figured X number of service learners times X number of miles times 50 cents a mile or whatever. And this is how we came up with 2,000. Or coordination, we'd say, the Central College staff person's time is worth X. She's going to spend X number of hours. That totals up to $500. The space, this room is worth $50. Background checks, we're going to do 100 of them. They cost $5. That's $500. So the budget narrative really is just sort of filling in the blanks for the budget itself. It doesn't have to be long. Ask yourself, or better yet, ask somebody else to take a look and say, what would you want to know if you were the reader? I'm always very, very often on the other side of tables. I read grant proposals all the time. I've done it for Campus Compact. I've done it for the Iowa Department of Cultural Affairs. And I can tell you that many times somebody doesn't get a grant simply because we don't know what they were talking about. It wasn't enough information. So that secret is to tell the story, not boring them with stuff that doesn't matter, but making sure they have what they do need to make a decision. And a budget narrative is about that. Okay. All right. I think that is everything that I have. I see there's let me see what this chat. Oh, no, that was the meeting ID. Okay. So does anyone have any questions?
Yeah. So if anyone wants to ask questions, this would definitely be the time to ask Cheri. So.
And here's the thing. I really, the thing is, people kind of dread writing grant proposals. I'm usually on this deadline, and so I'm stressed out over it, but it is really fun because you get to tell about the good work you're going to do, and you get to tell about some good things about your program that the people want to know. It really can be fun. And so I'd be delighted to talk on the phone with you, or actually, depending on where you are, we could meet over coffee and talk more about this.
I did have one question for you, actually, Cheri. I was writing down, does a grant usually ask specifically for an appendix at the end, or do you just normally include that?
It might say, you would almost always know it from either something that it outright says in the RFP. It might say include 3 letters of support. It might say include survey instruments. Sometimes a lot of times they'll say, this is all you can provide: the narrative, the budget narrative, and an objectives worksheet. And then you know, okay, they don't want that other stuff. So as long as you know that you're not going against their instructions, I would include it. I would absolutely not include it if it says we don't need letter of support or something. If they outright say we don't need anything else or want it, I would definitely not send it, because then they're going to think they don't follow directions.
All right.
So I would say the majority of grants that are for very much money will ask for letters of support or other things that you might want to throw in. And it is a chance for you to just augment what you've been able to tell them in a proposal.
Okay, so thanks everyone. Does anyone else have a question? No one was speaking up, but maybe we can give some more time. If Sam, Hannah, too. Okay.
I appreciate your attention. Yes.
That I will say, Cheri will give me the documents that she was talking about, and I'll send them out to everybody. And then this has also been recorded, so you'll have that as well. And yeah, just I'll make sure you have those things. And I need to ask for the terminology sheet. I don't have
the glossary. That's what I forgot to send you. That's right. I'll send that. And I'm not the author of that glossary, but I have the citation on there. I've taken it from another from a website, and the information is there. So
okay,
I give them credit. It's a handy document. Yeah, thank you, Sam. I don't know if everybody can see that little note there, but you too, Kevin. Thank you. And here's the thing. If you're working with an Iowa Campus Compact organization, a college, a university, a nonprofit organization that's connected, you're doing work that matters. And so I'm saying thank you to you for your year of service. And I hope to cross paths with you again on one of these webinars, or I want Miss Jordan, our Vista, who is not here today, to host a Vista party here in Pella, Iowa. And it would be fun, I promise. Katie can tell you, I can throw a mean party.
It's true. She's got a pretty cool house and tastes.
Or, if you don't want a 61-year-old woman there, I'll just give money to Jordan to host it. I don't have to be there, but I just so appreciate Vistas, and I so appreciate you being willing to live in poverty for a year. And here's the other thing. I appreciate that you understand how important this kind of work is. Not everybody does, nothing wrong with